I didn't pay for his lab. I didn't plant trees for him. I gave up. The only tree I had. And one sentence that opened a forest. My name is Solene. This story begins with a knot of green twine, a thumb-sized scar shaped like a comma, and a young scientist named Evo, who believed a city could remember how to breathe. Our yard had one tree, not big, just tall enough to braid shade across the kitchen window at 4 in the afternoon. My mother used to hang a swing from its lowest branch, tied with green twine that left soft dents on my palms. After she was gone, that tree became our family's last sentence that didn't need words. The summer the drought cracked the soil like old paint, Ivo moved into the apartment next door. He carried books with Latin names and a notebook blistered with field stickers. He was mapping native seeds, he said, trying to build a community seed bank so the hills we called Forever wouldn't end at the next fire. He had no budget, no lab, and a timeline shaped like a cliff. He needed living tissue from old neighborhood trees to track local adaptation, to see which families of oaks and laurels still held the memory of this heat, this wind, this exact stubborn ground. He asked for leaves from our tree. I said yes before the sentence could scare me. Then he asked for something I didn't see coming. Would you let me take the tree down? He didn't say it like a thief. He said it like a surgeon who knows the cost of every cut. The tree was sick at the core, he explained. Heart rot we'd never noticed, sending brittle signals down the trunk. He could harvest branches, cones, cambium, soil microbe data, even fungi that might be the missing hinge in his seed work. But only once. Only if we cut it now. Later would be too late. I told him no. Then maybe. Then I didn't sleep. My flaw, what I wrestle with, is this. I hoard the last of things. Last ticket stubs, last voicemails, last fruit from a season. I fear that letting go is the same as forgetting. The next afternoon, I ran my fingers along the low branch and felt the comma-shaped scar that the old swing twine had left in the bark. It looked like a pause between two thoughts that were afraid of each other. I called Ivo. Do it, I said. But save the twine if you can. We worked with our neighbor, a retired ranger whose hands looked like maps. Ivo labeled everything. Bag after bag, vial after vial. Breath fogging his mask, Sharpie squeaking. He coiled the green twine into his pocket. When the trunk finally leaned, it sighed like someone taking off a heavy coat. The yard felt larger and colder at the same time. Neighbors asked why I'd killed my mother's tree. I said nothing. That night, I sat at the stump, pressed my thumb into the comma that the saw had revealed, and told the dark, this is not an ending. This is a key. Ivo turned our kitchen table into a bench of beakers. He showed me how seeds sleep differently. A drowsiness specific as a fingerprint. He explained stratification with a mason jar and ice cubes and patience. He taught me that sharing a specimen could be a love letter, not a theft. When he left, he returned the green twine, now looped around a bundle of tiny paper envelopes. From your tree, he said, and from its neighbors. I'll keep the rest safe. I tied the twine to my wrist. It bit like a promise. No miracles. Just basements and lists and alarms that failed at 3 a.m. Ivo found space beneath the old library. Concrete, humming, full of the kind of cold that tastes like pennies. He begged for used freezers from a hospital. He borrowed a data logger from a meteorology class. He learned the sound a compressor makes before it gives up. The seed bank began with coffee cans and hope. A night janitor taught Ivo which outlet never lost power during storms. A retired ranger introduced him to a network of volunteers who knew which trees had survived the 1987 burn. A consultant mocked the effort, called it nostalgia storage at a public meeting, then threw his influence at a grant review. The grant vanished. Half the first year's collection was contaminated with mold. Labels bled when a pipe moaned and burst. A freezer died during a holiday weekend. Ivo found the seeds warm and sweating, their futures pooling into a damp statistical no. He started over and over and over. I helped where I could. Copying labels, slicing desiccant packs, learning the patience of check, don't guess. My kindness wasn't money. It was a promise kept past the fun part. Showing up with coffee at midnight, guarding data with the ferocity I used to guard my grief. And once, when a neighbor accused Ivo of cutting down memories for his resume, I stood on our stoop and said, carefully and publicly, "He's building a way to remember more than one tree." That cost me a friendship. It was worth the price of truth. When the second summer came, smoke wore the city like a shawl. Ash fell into our hair like the softest, saddest snow. Ivo worked with a mycologist to test the fungal partner seeds would need to thrive in burned soils. He mapped microclimates where saplings might stand a chance. He failed 12 times to get a stubborn acorn to crack without rotting. At year 4, a small grant arrived from a community bake sale that had nothing to do with cookies and everything to do with refusing despair. At year 6, a university offered shelf space and then took it back when budgets shivered. At year 8, a storm took the power for 16 hours. The backup system, promised and paid for, was never installed. Ivo ran to the library basement with bags of ice from every gas station that still had lights, slippers on, hair wet with weather. He packed freezers like a triage nurse packs silence. We lost some. We saved most. But for 2 weeks afterward, Ivo didn't speak above a whisper. His hands shook when he reached for labels. He took the green twine from the peg by his desk, the one from my mother's swing, and began to use short pieces to tie critical bundles, envelopes that must never be separated. He tied them the way I remembered the swing being tied. Twice around, once through. A small tug that listens. Those knots became the bank's heartbeat. By year 10, they called the project Rootcellar. Not fancy, just honest. And then, a letter. The city would fund a pilot replanting if the seed bank could prove one thing, that their seeds carried this place inside them. Not imported resilience, but local memory. The proof lay in a reference lineage, the genetic thread back to a neighborhood tree long gone. Our tree. Except somewhere, between a flood and a move and a night when the lights had stared too hard, the reference envelopes were missing. Ivo tore through his meticulous chaos. He emptied drawers, opened every freezer, whispered apologies to shelves, followed a trail of green twine that led nowhere. He sat on the basement floor, back to a humming machine, eyes closed. I brought him water. He said, "Maybe the forest doesn't need my version of help." I said nothing. I reached for his hands, lined now with the kind of maps only work writes. At dawn, the night janitor texted a photo. A fallen box behind an old rolling cart, dust seaming its lid like a horizon. On top, caught in a piece of green twine, a paper envelope with a coffee ring and the penciled letters Q12B, our tree's family. Ivo laughed like a man who had been underwater too long and remembered how to stand up. The pilot got its proof. We got a season with rain that remembered how to fall. Year 11. They invited the neighborhood to the first planting. Not a ribbon cutting. No drone footage. Just shovels and quiet breath hanging in the morning. I almost didn't go. My flaw tugged. Don't look, you'll want the exact tree back. But grief had finally taught me this. You can love a thing without insisting it never change. The hillside looked like a page turning. Children held paper envelopes tied with short lengths of green twine, the kind of twine that holds and yields at the same time. Under an awning, Ivo stood next to a table. On it, a display that said, Rootcellar, local seed, local memory. He didn't see me at first. 11 years changes the face, and faces are only part of the truth. I stepped closer and touched the comma-shaped scar at the base of my thumb. The one from holding the old branch the day we cut it. Solene? He said, finally turning. I nodded. My throat did the drawer jammed with papers thing. He reached under the table and brought out a small square of wood, planed smooth. A plaque. Not for a donor. For a donor tree. He traced the engraving with his finger. Our address, a date, a line of gratitude that didn't pretend it wasn't complicated. Will you place the first sapling? He asked. We walked to a circle where a hole waited, dark and ready. The sapling was small enough for one hand and brave enough for a century. He handed me a bundle, Q12B, tied with green twine, edges lifted by time. My hands learned the old knot without looking. I placed the sapling into the ground, pressed the soil, smoothed the air. Across the clearing, a woman I didn't know touched the stump of another lost tree and set a small ribbon there. A child counted worms like blessings. A retired ranger leaned on his shovel and pretended not to cry. Ivo didn't preach. I didn't explain. We listened. The hillside made a sound I can only call future. 1,000 leaves not yet born leaning toward each other. The city's exhale rehearsing itself. Around us, the green twine flashed like little rivers tying the day together. I pressed my thumb to the comma scar one last time, then opened my hand. The wind threaded itself through the new leaves. The moment didn't ask for words. I didn't pay for his lab. I didn't plant his forests. I gave him a tree, a knot, and the courage to keep tying the bundles that hold us. 11 years later, the forest showed up, and it remembered our names without saying them.